let's assume for the moment the flow idea is important. So somewhere we have some raw materials that flow into some form of a production facility, which we call a plant. And by the way, I'm doing this at the moment from a perspective of a product or a good, and I'm going to help you translate this figure into something for the humanitarian environment. All right. Into a plant, from there we make finished goods, and we normally take that to something we call a warehouse or a distribution center, prepositioning facility, your language. And from a prepositioning facility, I take it out to the market. If it's a commercial good, it will be the formal market, where we have a cafe or something like that, spaza shop, selling something, or it can be to individuals. That's sort of the framework we're talking about. We can make a motor car here or components of a motor car, and that can be taken out into the distribution center and taken out into the market. We can make hygiene kits, and we can kit them in our facility where we make it, we take it out to the field and distribute to the beneficiaries. Let me just see here. We had transport. What about warehousing? What about something we call inventory, stock control, inventory management, inventory? We had materials. Can I say this is materials handling, if it's okay with you, material handling? Yeah, material handling. I just want to add that there, material handling. Let's go back to procurement. Procurement. What about procurement? What about packaging? Meals ready to eat. How do we pack them? Freshwater kits. How do we pack them? How do we distribute them? Packaging. All right. What about order management? We had a few guys here in IT or communications. What about order management? How do we order? When do we order? Order management. You said something about reverse logistics. Returning goods from a field, wasn't it, Edna? What about reverse logistics? Where do we find that? Reverse logistics. What do I miss? We have transport, we have materials handling, warehousing, inventory, procurement, information systems. We can add that separately. Info systems. I think we probably have most of the items now. Now, what you said here is not wrong, because what you did is you took the framework of logistics management. I now underline the word management, because you know management means direct control, implement. That is what management is, coordinate. And you've given us a few of those. In fact, look at this, the admin one, probably the management one, probably the strategy one, the coordination one, probably the leave process for a moment. Yeah, those are sort of directly to do with management. Money and timeliness we'll get back to, process we'll get back to, yeah. That's sort of a management side. So maybe we should start in our picture to call this thing logistics management. Now let's interrupt ourselves now and ask ourselves, what is the supply chain then? If this is now a definition for logistics management, what is the supply chain? Now I'm going to write supply chain here. Supply chain. And the supply chain is very simplistically put, and all I'm mentioning now is in the slides in the textbook. I'm just at the moment sharing with you some thoughts and get your perspective as well. Supply chain is an integration of all those elements. So if I were to now link them and align them in sequence, I start getting supply chain perspective. What it means is upstream and downstream becomes important. So let me do this. There's our little sketch. You see that? The input of this one might be the output of that one. The input of this one might be the output of that one. But the output might also be the input into another one, or the output might be an input into another one. And so I'm building a frame from origin to destination of a number of small supply chains integrating upstream and downstream. So you start with your supplier, and you end with your customer's customer. Okay, so we understand your supplier, and we understand your customer's customer. That was where I was going. And the supply chain is then the integration of all those different elements, because supply chains compete. And I've said that earlier. Because supply chains compete. So let's continue. We've got logistics management. There's very specifically an inbound side to this, inbound, and there's an outbound side to it. So in the olden days, when we were a bit younger, we referred to the inbound side as materials management. Materials management. You might have heard that word, materials management. Materials management, not handling, materials management. And this side of the supply chain was called physical distribution. You might have heard that. Physical distribution. So where I'm going with this thing is I'm trying to understand what was this background and how this thing developed. We have materials management, physical distribution. That's now called today. It's called supply management, and distribution management. I had somewhere a word delivery. Who said delivery? Someone said delivery. Kabil, that delivery is in fact the distribution side. Now, normally on the outbound side, what distribution includes is transport and warehousing. All these arrows are transport. Let me write them down. These are transport, transport, and then my facilities are obviously warehousing, okay? So that's what I would like to say. I would like to call yours distribution. And that's sort of the two things of transport plus warehousing. Transport plus warehousing. So we're slowly getting to define this animal we're talking about. That's sort of part of a definition here. So food we have. Money is clearly important, all of this. The important thing for us in our environment is not to make a profit. Our environment wants to make a dollar get further. We call that yield leverage. We want to yield more out of our dollar. In your different organizations, it's important to tell donors, because what happens? Donors don't want to invest in your company, I don't know who it is, because they believe a small part gets to the beneficiary. They want to donate in his company, I don't know who that is, because they believe they are working better with their money. You get the point? So somewhere along the line, we must understand the importance of money. So whoever said money, it's crucial. I agree. Timeliness. What's the use of yesterday's newspaper? What's the use of food when people have died? What's the use of responding to an earthquake, but you're too late? And in the logistics terms, we call this just in time. But sometimes we carry inventory and stock just in case, because we are carrying too much of that. We're going to come back to that whole issue of inventory. But the timeliness, I think, is important. Process, I think this is a process. We can tick that. Response, I think we have to respond the whole time, coming back up into the supply chain. Efficiency, I forgot, is one of our management functions. So efficiency, I'm going to do the same as here. They are all our management functions. Yeah. Workflow, I can also say, is maybe management function, although the workflow is maybe linked to the journey from A to B, if that is what you meant. I think you said workflow. And then finally the chain, yes, I love it, supply chain. A supply chain is got a couple of links. There's your links in your supply chain. And by the way, the strength of your supply chain is the strength of the weakest link. That's the strength of a chain.